we have the capacity to change. You're not you yet. Your life is a journey of learning to know yourself. I like that. Hello, welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about Matthew Perry's memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. I am also in recovery from addiction, so this book was relatable, good on so many levels. I read this first in February. Even at the time, I was like, this is so good, I want to make a video on it. But I decided I was just going to read it and enjoy it. When I read it a second time, a couple of weeks ago, there was just a lot to say, hence all of the notes. So this is Matthew Perry's autobiography. You probably know who he is. He's best known for playing Chandler on Friends. Chandler? This is weird to say it in an English accent. That's what he's best known for. This is an amazing book that I think everyone should read. I want to give a well-rounded review, so I will be talking about some unlikable parts of the book as well, but on the whole, I think this is just so well written, well paced, a really well done memoir. Interesting, funny. I think you should read it. I have written 5 categories that we're going to talk about, just to give some guidance. I will put the timestamps in the description. They're all going to be related to each other anyway. I think this is a really good book to read if you know anyone struggling with an addiction, because it will give you a very in-depth view of how addiction develops and progresses and the thought processes behind it. I don't know, because I'm on the other side of the one having had an addiction, but I can imagine if you can see someone you love struggling with an addiction, you can think, why are they doing this? This is threatening their life. Why are they carrying on doing this? And he, by sharing his story, just explains that really well, because his story is a very extreme story. We're talking like multiple surgeries, he's in a coma, his colon explodes, that's how the book starts, so I don't feel like I'm giving too much away. This is a very extreme case of addiction. Well, I say extreme. Reading this to me was not shocking, because I hear this kind of stuff all the time speaking to other friends that I have made in recovery. Equally, a really good book to give to anyone who is struggling themselves with an addiction, and it depends how far the illness has progressed, because there will be a point where, like, you can give them the book but they're probably not going to read it. He's very honest, and then how he's in recovery is such a powerful testimony, I guess. So if you are struggling with alcohol or any other drugs, can give you hope that recovery is possible. This is someone who has really, really struggled with this illness. But I will say as well, it's not necessarily to do with how bad you struggled in your addiction. Like, you don't need to have had all of this stuff happen that he talks about. You don't need to have had to stay in hospital because some big health problem caused by your alcohol or your drug use. You don't have to have been to rehab. Like, you can know that you have a problem and that you need to stop. You don't have to go to this extent. I don't know why I feel compelled to say that. Since I was 19, I knew that I was going to have a problem with alcohol, and I thought that I had, you know, decades. I was like, well, alcoholics are like Frank Gallagher from Shameless. Like, this is someone in their 50s at least. I was like, I've got plenty of time if I'm 19. I had 6 years. You are never too early. If you suspect you have a problem, you're probably right, and you don't have to wait until it gets really bad to do something. Recovery is possible. I talk about this a lot on my channel, but also he talks about this a lot in the book. The one thing I will say is that it is sad watching Friends again, knowing how much he struggles, because in the book he does talk about specific episodes of Friends and be like, when we were filming Monica and Chandler's again, Chandler, it sounds so weird, when they were filming their wedding, you know, this is a high moment for his character on this TV show where they're all super famous and it's the biggest show. You would be thinking it's, oh my gosh, what a moment that must be to be experiencing that. And then he's being driven at the end of shooting to rehab, like to back to treatment. It does kind of make you feel sad when you have that kind of insight and then you watch Friends. I mean, his drug use was obvious on Friends. Between the seasons, you can see his weight shift dramatically. He talks about that in the book as well. He says that when he's lost lots of weight, that's opiates. When he's put on weight, that's alcohol. When he's lost lots of weight and he has a goatee, that's lots of drugs. It does make it a bit, not difficult to watch Friends, but it's like, it's sad to realise that someone who's performing on this brilliant show, like happy show, makes people feel good. We love Friends. It's sad to realise that they were actually in their personal life really struggling. I will say I've met one person who doesn't like Friends. Do any of you know people who don't like this show? I thought it was like universally loved. I mean, like someone my age who just doesn't like it. I'm like, what is wrong with you? I'm literally filming this. I don't have a tripod. I've got books stacked on top of a box set of Friends. Like, I love Friends. Okay, the first thing I wanted to talk about was how he talks about the progression of his illness. I think he does a really good job in terms of, this is a memoir, so he's not just talking about addiction. He does mention in the title, The Big Terrible Thing, which is addiction. It's well paced, it's a good mix of anecdotes, things from his childhood and growing up, his movie star friends and lovers, which is again the title of the book. Like, he talks about Bruce Willis, working with him on a film, he talks about dating Julia Roberts. So you get all of these general memoir stories, but it's really good the way it's structured because he shows all of that, like just general life stuff, alongside how his disease developed. There's one point where he talks about the first time he drank and he suddenly felt right again, like the world just made sense. He was with his best friends, who are still his friends, which is really cool, and they were throwing up. They were outside and he was looking at the sky, and it was like suddenly like, oh, he was drunk, and it just made sense, like the world was right. And I really related to that. That is like the beginning of where he's talking about drinking. And then, of course, it all gets a lot more extreme. Here we are, progression of the illness. Can you see? One line that struck out to me and made me laugh when he's talking about during one of his first days in rehab, and he's outside smoking and it's raining and there's a light bulb swinging in the smoking section, and he says out loud, "This is what hell is. I am in hell." And it brought me back to my stay in rehab, because we also had it was like a shed outside, and there was like this light bulb that eventually went out, didn't work. And I went in February, so yeah, it was raining, cold, just sit out there, be like, what is the world? It's interesting as well because he talks about his relapses. He says that I'm capable of staying sober unless anything happens, which I think if you're in early recovery, you might be able to relate to that. He talks about how he relapses when he's having a fight with his girlfriend and there's a bottle of pills on the side and they're knocked over and he can't take it anymore. He's like, this is the anything that's happened. I'm capable of staying sober unless anything happens. Anything is happening, he's having this fight. So I took 3 of the pills and somehow made it through the night, but I had thereby ended 2 years of sobriety. This stuck out to me as well because I now have 16 months. This was a reminder. It's not necessarily to do with being scared, it's more just to be aware all the time. He talks in another point in the book about how your disease when you're in a meeting is in the car park doing push-ups waiting for you to come out. Like, it's never gone, it's always there. It's more just not being complacent. Like he was in this situation where there were these pills, painkillers. He was having this fight, it was just a spur of the moment thing. I also like the way he talked about, in terms of the progression of addiction, he talks about it's like alcoholic logic, like this addict reasoning that starts to develop because you spend so much time by yourself, because when you're drinking or using, you just want to be alone to be able to drink or use more, because people would, if you were doing this with other people, they'd be like, wow, you're drinking a lot. So you end up being alone, and as a consequence of that, you end up behaving in a really not unacceptable way. But it's just when you look back on it, you're like, I can't believe I was like that. But because you're by yourself and you're doing this thing, it becomes normal very quickly. He was making a film with Bruce Willis and he wants to be able to party with all these people, but also they can party like normal people, whereas he is partying like an addict. Like, he can't stop. He's not going to be okay the next morning. He's going to want to take more. When they arrived, I sat on my bed counting them. The Xanax. This way I can drink with Bruce and the others, but then when I'm finally alone, I can just pop one of these and go to sleep. I may have been a man with a plan, but I was also ignoring the fact that this was a completely lethal combination. Something like that really stuck out to me because I was like, yeah, this is what it's like. It's trying to make things normal that just really aren't. You're like, oh yeah, there's a reason why I need to take this before I do this, or I need this much to cope with this. And it makes sense in a weird way, but it's also, as he says, potentially lethal. And he talks later on about how he never wanted to die. If dying was a consequence of getting to take the quantity of drugs I needed, then death was something I was going to have to accept. I was able to hold those two things in my mind at the same time. I don't want to die, but if I have to in order to get sufficient drugs on board, then amen to oblivion. I can distinctly remember holding pills in my hand and thinking, this could kill me, and taking them anyway. And I think that's what it's like. Another interesting part is where he says, the idea of being famous, the idea of being rich, the idea of being me, I can't enjoy any of it unless I'm high. I lack a spiritual connection that protects me from these feelings. I think that is a good segue into the next section that I wanted to talk about, because we've talked there a bit about the progression of the illness, from him throwing up with his friends when they're like 13, the first time he gets drunk, to the insanity of it. And he mentioned there spiritual connection. So now we are going to talk about God and spirituality, because he does talk about this a lot in the book. I like this book because he doesn't shy away from this topic. And to me, that's also a sign that his recovery is pretty strong, because I've met so many people that have struggled with the third step and they're just stuck on it. And that has not been a problem for me, and it's good to see that it's not a problem for him either. If the idea of God irritates you, or this just doesn't speak to you, please move on to the next chapter. I'll leave the timestamps in the description for the next thing we're going to talk about. We are next talking about recovery speak, which can be interesting. It's like the secret things which, if you've read this book, you may not have picked up if you're not in recovery, but there were little, beacons to me. I was like, oh, I understand that phrase has more significance than just being a way to describe addiction. So that is the next thing if you don't want to talk about God. But for those of you who do, we are now talking about God and spirituality, and this is a really big part of my recovery. I think of a lot of people's recovery. If you're in any kind of program, I mentioned the third step, it is a vital part, and he goes into it a lot, and I appreciated that. Been too busy nattering on, there's so much to say about this book. You may have noticed the lights have changed. I decided to put the lights on. I don't know if it's getting too dark. From the beginning, in the book, he mentions this and does not shy away from it. So on page 2, he's saying, yes, there is a hell. Don't let anyone tell you different. I've been there, it exists, end of discussion. Which I think is a fair enough thing to say once you read the book and see everything he's gone through. You're like, yeah, I also believe it, but I know there are people who don't. I think his relationship with God is really interesting in this book because he talks about this deal that he strikes with God, where he's like, God, you can do whatever you want to me, just make me famous. And of course, he ends up on Friends, but God also does whatever he wants to him. And he goes through a lot of pain, which he describes in the book. So threaded throughout the book are these references to God and to this sort of impending doom of the magnitude of what his addiction is going to do and how bad it's going to be. So in one part of the book, he talks about how I could feel God watching me, waiting. The most unnerving part was I knew God was omniscient. He knew already what he had in store for me. Which, yeah, that's kind of, it's weird. We're not going to talk about religion in this video, but that's a weird thing to think. To think that everything is already laid out. But I like to think there's like multiple paths. Like you still have free will. There are many different things that could happen, and God can see all the possibilities. I said we were going to talk about God. You knew what was coming. He talks about how the idea of this looming catastrophe. Something was looming. I had an idea what it was, but I did not know for sure. Something to do with drinking every night, but just how bad was it going to be? I'd taken to drinking alone in my apartment because that was safest. We talked earlier about how addiction wants you on your own because then no one is gonna look at you and be like, hey, that's not normal. Why are you drinking that amount? Why are you doing that? This, I think, does a good job of illustrating how deep in his addiction he was. And the answer to this kind of thing, the solution is, well, one of the solutions, one that I found works as well, and which he clearly does, is to fix your spiritual connection in the world. He talks about the first time he takes Vicodin for, I think it was back pain. Let me double check. I need to be thorough. I need to be thorough if I'm talking about this. He's talking about how he's on a film, Fools Rush In with Salma Hayek, and he's filming this movie. As they're shooting the film, during one of the lunch breaks, he decides to go on a jet ski. I turned the jet ski hard right, but my body went straight on. I was airborne and then I was not airborne. When I got back to shore, I knew I was hurt. So he's had this, not a collision, but he's, had this horrible fall off the jet ski. Those things are dangerous, right? And the doctor gives him this pill. They called the doctor, who came by my trailer and handed me a single pill in a plastic package. Take this when you're done, the doctor said. Everything will be fine. I stashed that pill in my pocket, and I swear to God, I think if I'd never taken it, none of the next 3 decades would have gone the way they did. Who knows? I just know it was really bad. And then he talks about how he takes the pill and then drives home. I put down the top of the Mustang and swallowed the pill. As the pill kicked in, something clicked in me. And it's been that click I've been chasing the rest of my life. This was my pink sky. I couldn't believe how good I felt. I was in complete and pure euphoria. I was on top of the world. It was the greatest feeling I'd ever had. Nothing could go wrong. I remember thinking, if this doesn't kill me, I'm doing it again. This is a bad memory, of course, because of what followed, but it was also a good memory. I was close to God that morning. I had felt heaven. Not many people get that. I shook hands with God that morning. Was it God? Or something else. We're talking about God. He mentions like all of the key points in developing his addiction, but he's always coming back to God was there or God was watching, which you can take in a good or bad way. And then, of course, because he's had this experience, typical addict behaviour. My first move when I got home that morning was to get in touch with that doctor and tell him that the pill had worked for the pain. I decided to leave the God part out. I went to sleep, and when I woke up, 40 more of those pills had been delivered to my house. Eureka! A year and a half later, I was taking 55 of those pills a day. I weighed 128 pounds when I checked into Hazelden Rehab in Minnesota, my life in ruins, having no idea what had happened to me. I wasn't trying to die, I was just trying to feel better. And that, I think, is the crux of it. If you don't understand why a loved one is drinking or using, they don't necessarily want to die from taking that dangerous amount of whatever substance it is. They just want to feel better. There is something broken. And this is where we come back to God. He talks later about how when he's sober for a bit, something way, way bigger than me was in charge now. Miracles do happen, which is what a lot of people talk about when they come into recovery, having a higher power, something bigger than you, to be in charge. He talks as well, one of the key experiences he talks about is where he experiences God in his kitchen as like this perfect ball of light. And he talks about how he stayed sober off of that experience for like 18 months, 2 years. That resonated with me because I've had like a similar God moment where anytime anything seems uncertain now, I can go back to that moment and I feel that feeling and I'm like, oh no, I'm okay. I can keep going because of this one experience. You can believe that or not. I mean, in his instance, he is talking about how I think he's coming off of detoxing from Xanax. He wonders subsequently if this ball of light that he saw in his kitchen was actually a spiritual experience or was the result of the detox, which I think is a fair point. But for me, at least, the experience I had, that was 6 months sober. So like, I'm good. I'm good. I just like how he talks about it. I liked how he's not making apologies. He's not explaining it. He's just saying, this is what happened to me. This is why I believe this. This is what I believe. Like, he's not overly justifying it, unlike me, who had to put a massive disclaimer at the start of this section being like, if you don't like God or God irritates you, please go on to the next chapter. The next thing we're going to talk about is the recovery speak in this book. Because, as I said, there are little phrases that probably mean nothing to you if you are not in recovery or if you don't know anyone in recovery. But I'm going to point out those little phrases so you can be kind of in on the secret and we can just delve into them. I did wonder if this bit was appropriate to share, but I think it is. Anyone in recovery who has thoughts on this, please comment because I would like to know your opinions. I've not told anyone in recovery about my YouTube channel, so I couldn't really ask anyone this. In terms of recovery speak, I'm talking about things that people will say in recovery that are not symbolic, but they mean more than just the phrase that they are. So he talks about the gift of desperation, which is where you're so desperate for help that you'll do anything. And so he talks about how because he has been the furthest down the scale, which is another recovery-ism, I don't know what to call it, but he says I can help a desperate man get sober because he's had the gift of desperation, so he knows what it's like when you're just like, please help me, I can't do this by myself anymore. He, even at the start of the book on page 3, he's saying, I've had it all, but it was all a trick. Nothing was going to fix this. It would be years before I even grasped the notion of a solution. If you are struggling with an addiction, there is a solution, and that's what the whole big book is about. It talks about the solution to our problem. The key to the problem I would come to understand was this. I lacked both spiritual guidelines and the ability to enjoy anything. He talks about struggling with anhedonia, which I am very grateful. Is that how you pronounce that in English? Anhedonia? That sounds wrong. Inability to feel anything, like inability to feel pleasure. He talks about being unable to enjoy anything. That I thankfully have not struggled with. He talks about when alcohol still worked for him. We talk about in recovery when alcohol stops working. Up to this point, you may have known that drinking caused problems, but you were willing to put up with the problems because it still worked. And then they will reach a point where you are no longer looking at your bottle being like, I know you hurt me all the time, but I'm still willing to put up with you because you still give me something. And there will come a point where you are staring at that bottle and being like, I hate you, but knowing that you're going to drink it anyway, like it stops working. And it then spirals very quickly. Well, for me at least, it spiraled pretty quickly. He talks about the obsession for alcohol. In recovery, we talk about a mental obsession, spiritual malady, physical allergy. Mental obsession is where you can't stop thinking about alcohol. Spiritual malady is where you aren't spiritually connected with the world. There's like a spiritual void in your life and you're filling that with drink. Physical allergy, the idea of alcoholism being an allergy. The same way that if someone has a nut allergy, if they eat peanut butter or cashew nuts, just even a little bit, they will have or they could have an extreme reaction to it. If you apply the same thing to alcohol, if an alcoholic has even a small bit of alcohol, just one, that is going to have a big impact. They're going to have a big reaction to that. You can't have just one. The saying is, one's too many and 100's not enough. This doesn't apply to everyone. I know some people don't like all of these kinds of phrases, but for me, that one definitely resonates. I can't have just one. Or I could have just one, but then I'm obsessing over the fact that I managed to have the one. And it's like normal people, like if you can drink like a normal person, you're not like, oh, look at me, I'm so good, I only had one. And you're not then thinking about it the rest of the night. You're just like, oh yeah, I only fancy one. Like, it's completely alien concept to me. Stephen King talks about it in his book on writing. Stephen King is an alcoholic. I didn't know that when I read his book. His book on writing is his memoir, where he's talking all about writing and his tips for writers. And so if you like writing, that's a brilliant book. I will also leave a link to that because it's really good. And in that he talks about how he still can't get over the fact that people in restaurants will leave half of their wine. Like, they'll just be like, oh no, I don't feel like finishing that. And he wants to go over and be like, finish that, what are you doing, finish that. I relate to that as well. So he talks about how the first time he felt an obsession for alcohol. I noticed that no one else seemed even the slightest bit fazed by the lack of drink at Gabby's, but I had that overpowering pull. I was freaked out by this, especially as it was me and only me who seemed to be struggling. It left me unable to sleep, restless, irritable, and discontented until the sun finally rose. And restless, irritable, and discontent is another one of those recovery-isms that we say a lot and come back to. You're gonna feel restless, irritable, and discontent until you address the root of the problem, part of which is the spiritual connection we talked about. He also mentioned something that I hear a lot of people say, and which I myself have gone through, where he talks about how alcohol was his best friend. It never wanted to talk about itself. It was always there. It took away so much of the pain. It made movies better, songs better. It made me better. It made me comfortable with where I was instead of wishing I was somewhere, anywhere else. It allowed me to control my feelings and, in doing so, control my world. And I was fairly certain I would go crazy without it. And I'm right about that, by the way. I would have gone crazy without it. I feel the same. Again, if we're talking about when alcohol worked for you, there was a reason why you were drinking, and maybe it did serve a purpose. I don't need a pill at 6 in the morning. I need it when it's scary at night. I can't find the center of the fear. It's general. Also, I can't sleep, so there's a negotiation every single night with myself. My mind races. The ideas come so fast. Relate so much to this. I recently did a video about sleep in recovery and healing my relationship with sleep in recovery, so I'll link that if you want to check that out, because yeah, I felt that one a lot. He talks about the idea of pulling a geographic, where he thinks if he moves, then he might be better. But the saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. He also talks about the first time he read the big book, and I really related to that because I first read it in rehab and I had a similar experience. He talks about how I closed the book and began to weep. I was not alone. There was an entire group of people who thought the same way I did. It was an amazing moment and a terrible moment all at the same time. What this meant was that I was never going to be alone again. It also meant that I was an alcoholic and would have to stop drinking and drugging right now and every day, one day at a time for the rest of my life. Yeah. There are so many profound things in this book that really hit me. Had my habit killed me, it would have killed the wrong person. I wasn't fully me yet. That line is very bleak, but I think it's also hopeful because you don't have to be defined by the bad things that you've said or done. You're not static. Like, you're not like, oh, I can't drink anymore or I don't drink anymore and that's it. You become a new person, he's saying. Had my habit killed me, it would have killed the wrong person. I wasn't me yet. That's something to hold on to. You're not you yet. I think, to be honest, that's true regardless of like whether you're in recovery. We're all new people. We have the capacity to change. You don't have to give up. You're not you yet. You're still becoming you. Your life is a journey of learning to know yourself. I think that's quite remarkable. I like that. I like that a lot. If you are watching this far, please leave an orange heart in the comments just so I can see who's with me on this. Sobriety has to be, or your recovery has to be, one of the most, if not the most important thing in your life, or else you're gonna lose everything else. It has to be the thing that underpins everything. Another thing I hear a lot of people talking about in recovery is the maintenance, the administration involved in keeping up with your habit. So he's talking about, I would wake up and somehow have to find those 55 pills. It was like a full-time job. My whole life was maths. I need 8 to get home, then I'll be there for 3 hours, so I need 4 more. And all this to just maintain, to not be sick, to avoid the inevitable, which is the detox. We've not talked about that yet. Talks about how all I ever wanted to do was to feel better. He uses the phrase a lot, the phenomenon of craving, which is, I think, in Dr. Silkworth's letter. It's at the beginning of the big book. They talk about the phenomenon of craving. This is what I was saying earlier about how you can't just have one. If you have one, it's the physical allergy part of it. The phenomenon of craving kicks in and then your mental obsession gets restarted. It just becomes this horrible, vicious cycle. Whereas if you stay sober, you're not gonna have that craving. So for me, it's been like 500 plus days. I don't have cravings anymore. I might have like impulses and want to drink, but it's not this phenomenon of craving, but that's like why it's tough if you do fall off, because that kicks in straight away. If you puncture the membrane of sobriety, alcoholism kicks in and goes, hey, remember me? Nice to meet you again. Now give me just as much as you did last time or I'll kill you or make you crazy. And then the obsession of my mind kicks in and I can't stop thinking about feeling better, matched with a phenomenon of craving. And what you're left with is a bruise that starts off one way and it never gets better. Nobody has a drinking problem and then stops and then drinks socially and it's fine. The disease just picks up. So it's progressive. There is one analogy which helps me understand this, which is if you imagine your sobriety as a candle and everyone gets the same candle. And when you're drinking, the candle is burning down. If you stop drinking, the candle goes out. If you start drinking again, it burns down from the same point. It's progressive. If you stop drinking and then you've stopped for however long and then you start again, you don't get a brand new candle. You have the same candle. It's gonna just start from that low point. It's never gonna get better. It's only ever gonna get worse. Another example of the addict logic, like alcoholic logic, this is towards the end of the book. He's having lung problems, he's like wheezing, he realizes there's a problem and he's on a 1-week waiting list to see a pulmonary doctor, so for his lungs. He's having problems because he smokes a lot. I don't know if I made that clear. That week went by so slowly. Sometimes I would sit up and smoke a cigarette and hope that that would make the wheezing disappear. I am no rocket scientist. It's the same as like, if a normal person goes to the doctor and the doctor's like, we've done some tests and your liver or your kidneys, like things are not doing well, you need to stop drinking. A normal person would be like, oh my gosh, that's scary. Yes, of course, I will stop drinking. An alcoholic goes to the doctor says, we've done these tests, oh my gosh, your liver and your kidneys, it's not looking good, you need to stop drinking. The alcoholic is like, oh gosh, that's scary, I need a drink. I did say that I wanted this to be like a comprehensive review, so there were some unlikable parts of the book which I think we need to go through. I remember reading a review in The Guardian, I will find it and put like a clip from it here, where she's talking about how he's repetitive. She makes some sort of like snide comment, which I kind of agreed with. There are some phrases he repeats. Okay, so there aren't a lot of unlikable bits, but I did want this to be balanced because up to this point I've been talking about love the spirituality, love the honesty, love how he's depicting addiction and the progression of his illness and sharing all of these things. I think it's great. Love it so far. And if this is going to be like a balanced review, balanced overview of the book, I want to include some of the unlikable bits. On page 86, he talks about flying in a private jet that costs $175,000. He flies it twice in a day between LA and Switzerland. He's in the Swiss rehab, flies back to LA. The people in Switzerland said, oh yeah, you'll be able to get this amount of OxyContin in LA. And he's like, great, I'll go home then. And then he gets to LA and they're like, no, we're not giving you that. And so then he's like, oh. And then he flies back. That made me kind of sit back because I was like, there are parts of this book that are relatable. There are other parts which are not. Back in LA, I went to see my doctor. I need 1800 milligrams a day, I said. Oh no, she said, we're not giving you that at all. Cancer patients only get 100 milligrams. This only upped my gratitude that I didn't have cancer. But the doctor in Switzerland told me that that's what I'd be on when I got home. I'm in charge now. Here's 30 milligrams. This would not do. I would get incredibly sick. There was only one thing for it. That very same night, I booked another $170,000 private jet and flew right back to Switzerland. On the one hand, I get it. He's used to having a certain amount and if he's not going to get that, he's going to get sick. But also he does say opiate detox won't kill you. Alcohol detox can kill you. Benzodiazepine detox can kill you. Opiate detox is horrible, but it's not gonna actually kill you. So I can kind of get why he needed to fly twice on a private jet, but it's also like, but the environment. He talks about falling out with one of his friends who was actually offered the role of Chandler on Friends before him and who turned it down to do another sitcom where he would be the star. He turned down the part of Chandler, then Matthew Perry was able to get the role. And it's really interesting. He talks about getting the role. I think you should read the book, so not gonna go too much into this. And also I'm focusing more so on the addiction element because that's what I really related to as much as I love Friends. As much as I think Chandler might be my favourite character. Anyone who's watched Friends multiple times, you go through phases, right? Like you'll watch it and be like, oh, this time Rachel is my favourite, or this time Phoebe, this time Monica, this time Ross, this time Ross, and this time Chandler. He's talking about having this conversation, meeting this friend who was offered the role of Chandler and turned the role down, obviously with all that happened afterwards and how big Friends was. Can you imagine how that guy feels? And he's meeting this friend, I think 2 years after this has all happened. So he's been on Friends for a while. It's a big show. You know what, Craig? It doesn't do what we all thought it would. It doesn't fix anything. He's saying how getting the role, it's not made his life better. And he says in brackets, what a sobering thought for a 26-year-old who had only ever wanted fame and had only just realised that fame hadn't filled the holes at all. No, what filled the holes was vodka. Craig stared at me. I don't think he actually believed me. I still don't think he believes me. I think you actually have to have all your dreams come true to realise they are the wrong dreams. One hand, I think, yeah. Other hand, I think, is that not obvious? I don't know. I put this under unlikable because it's not that it felt ungrateful, but I think hopefully you'll be able to get what I'm saying when I talk about that passage. Like, he is so lucky. He has so much money and fame. But I guess the point he's making is like, that doesn't fix anything in the end. It's not necessarily unlikable. It's dealing with uncomfortable like realities. On the one hand, yeah, fame doesn't solve everything. Money doesn't solve everything. But on the other hand, it's like, well, not everyone has that much money. He kind of keeps on this, he makes this point a few times, and I think maybe this is why it started to be something that I disliked, because I was like, okay, I get it, like you're saying fame doesn't solve your problems, but he's talking about his friends. I'd change places with all of them in a minute, and forever, if only I could not be who I am, the way I am, bound on this wheel of fire. They don't have a brain that wants them dead. They all sleep fine at night. I don't expect that would make them feel any better about the choices they made. I would give it all up not to feel this way. I think about it all the time. It's no idle thought, it's a cold-hearted fact. That Faustian prayer I made was a stupid one, the prayer of a child. It was not based on anything real. I have the money, the recognisability and the near-death experiences to prove it. He is in a very unique position as a very high-profile person who is on Friends. That in itself is a unique position. And then tie that in with the fact that he has struggled so much with addiction. But I think it's the bound on this wheel of fire. I don't know, that phrase, it sounds a bit self-pitying. I don't think it is, but that's just, it seems unlikable to me for that reason. He says it a few times, he's reiterating the sentiment. I'm a bit like, I'm not really sure about this. He says later on, I have a friend who doesn't have any money, lives in a rent-controlled apartment, never made it as an actor, has diabetes, is constantly worried about money, doesn't work. And I would trade places with him in a second. In fact, I would give up the money, all the fame, all the stuff to live in a rent-controlled apartment. I'd trade being worried about money all the time to not have this disease, this addiction. I don't know what you think about that. I immediately am like, I have no idea how he feels. I know how I feel in my addiction, but I have no idea how he feels. He clearly, his disease progressed a lot worse in terms of the things that happened to him, like the hospital stays and everything. So I'm like, from that point of view, I can have no opinion on what he's saying here because I don't know. Even if I'm just making a judgment from my point of view, that's not relevant to his point of view. It's a case of like the grass is always greener. I think it's not only that he's saying, oh, I would trade places with him, but the fact that he's like, I would give up the money, I would give up the fame. I will just leave that with you as to like, you make your own opinion. To me, it doesn't sit right with me, but I also know, who am I to judge? I have no idea what it's like to be in his disease. I know what it's like to be me. I don't know if I would feel the same way, but we never know. Like, I've not walked in his shoes. I don't know. But I just wanted to try and be more balanced, so I'm including some things here that made me go, that made me sit back a bit and be like, really? He seems to have some problem with Keanu Reeves. This is what the woman who wrote the review in The Guardian was talking about, the repetition. He seems, angry about the fact that Keanu Reeves is still alive. I don't know if they have some kind of beef, but he just mentioned him a couple times and I'm like, I thought Keanu Reeves was like beloved actor. No, he's like one of the, like a Tom Hanks-esque kind of, yes, we love, no, maybe not. I don't know. That also, I was like, what is he talking about? The other thing that kind of, I've not made my mind up yet is he says, the big book says that alcohol is cunning, baffling and powerful. This is true. This is a phrase to keep coming back to. Addiction, alcohol is cunning, baffling and powerful. But he goes on to say, but I would also add it's patient. And I don't know if this is just because I'm very protective of the big book, because I'm like, this helped me so much. And I'm like, hey, leave it alone. You don't get to like edit it or like insert your own view in it. But he's saying it's patient. As soon as you raise your hand and say, I'm having a problem, it's as though addiction says, well, if you're going to be so stupid as to say something about it, I'll have to go away for a while. I'll be in rehab for 3 months and think, well, I'm just going to use when I get out of here. But I can wait for 9 more days to do it. The disease is just drumming its fingers. In AA, it's often said that when you're in a meeting, your disease is doing one-armed push-ups outside, just waiting for you to leave. I do think it is patient, like he's not wrong in describing it, but it's the fact that he's tacking on patient to the cunning, baffling and powerful. I'm like, They wrote the book. You've written your book, but they wrote the book on this disease. So I don't know. I think I'm trying to find things that were like just a bit iffy, and that felt wrong to me to kind of be like, oh, it's cunning, baffling, powerful, and patient. I'm like, no. We've gone through the unlikability bit, so relax. I'm not going to be saying any more horrible things. I don't even think I said anything horrible there. I wanted there to be some balance. But I hope you got the idea, the kind of thing that made me just kind of wonder and be like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I hope you got that from the examples I gave. I also want to talk about the way that I related to this book, my experience with addiction. And I've kind of put this throughout the video. There are a few key things that he said which were just like, as I was reading it, I was like, this could be about me. One thing that resonated was when he says, I have addiction as bad as you can have it. It's backs to the walls time. It's going to kill me. I guess something has to. Robert Downey Jr., talking about his own addiction, once said, it's like I have a gun in my mouth and my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the metal. Even on good days, when I'm sober and I'm looking forward, it's still with me all the time. There's still a gun. I relate to that. That could also be a bit unlikable. I don't know. Is that kind of like, woe is me? I don't know, because sometimes I feel like that as well. I'm like, well, this is with me all the time. This hasn't gone away. Because some people think that you're fixed. Like I came out of rehab and they're like, oh, you're all better now. And I'm like, in one sense, yes. Like I'm no longer physically dependent on alcohol, which is good. But in another sense, in a much more real sense, I feel like that's like a quote from The Office, but in a more real sense, like it's never going away. I have to continually deal with this. And some days it's no problem. Like I don't have to think about my sobriety. It's fine. And other days it's a struggle, but it's not something anyone wants to hear about. I don't know. Now I'm sounding like I'm being woe is me in this video. There's something relatable about that quote from where he's talking about Robert Downey Jr., but maybe there's also something unlikable, but then I don't know. It's a difficult thing to talk about. I want there to be like space for you to understand like one side and the other side. Like it doesn't have to be absolutely like this is bad, this is wrong, like this is the wrong thing to say, or this is entitled or whatever, or this is an absolute truth and you deserve all this pity. Like I think there's a balance there. It's so dark now, I'm sorry. I had no idea this video was going to be as long as it's going to be, but I hope if you're still here, you're with me now. I mean, I'm talking like anything has happened. I've been away, so that's why it suddenly like feels a bit darker. But for you, it's been like 2 seconds because I'm just going to put the clips next to each other. It's like magic. Okay, yeah, there were a few things that I highlighted because I just related to them so much. He talks about when he's in his early 20s, kind of having this existential crisis. I have had 2 existential crises. One when I was 19. I have done a video about how to get through an existential crisis, so I will link that for you if you by any chance happen to be struggling with an existential crisis or just want to talk about those bigger issues that maybe we don't always talk about. He also talks about having this sudden crisis of existence and like, what's the point? As I turned a corner, something else hit me that had never occurred to me before. Death. Fear of death. Questions like, why are we all here? What's the meaning of all of this? What's the point? How do we arrive at this? What are human beings? The drink and that walk opened a chasm in me that's still there. I was so troubled. A great void had opened up beneath me. And I felt that very much, that great void. Kind of, to be honest, still feel it. He mentions realising that he can't go without drinking and being really confused and frightened by it. Why can't I think of a single solitary thing except a drink? If you're at a bar, you just order another drink. But when it's the middle of the night, you don't tend to lie awake wishing you had one in your hand. That was terrifying, and that was a secret. 10 years later, I read the following words in the big book. Drinkers think they are trying to escape, but really they are trying to overcome a mental disorder they didn't know they had. Don't know about the words there, but we talked about the mental obsession. That's what they're referring to. I don't really want to go into this, but I have highlighted it, so maybe I think it's important for me to say. He talks about something that a lot of people that I know have talked about. There are 2 kinds of drug addicts, the ones who want to go up and the ones who want to go down. I wanted to melt into my couch and feel wonderful while watching movies over and over again. Don't want to say too much, but I related to that. I was scared out of my mind. This was real now. I was on my way to rehab. I was 26 years old. I was like, yes, get that. I was tired, the pills were not doing what they used to. I had to take a certain number just to not feel sick all the time. I was always so sick, I didn't want to eat. I was constantly vomiting. That's what it was like for me. It's surreal looking back because I can't believe that I just accepted that, but that was the price I was willing to pay. I was like, yeah, I don't care if I feel sick. I don't care if I'm vomiting every day. I'm gonna keep going. And then it got to the point where I was like, oh no, I want to stop, but I can't. So that was scary as well. Don't really want to go into that. There was an anecdote which for me just sums up what it's like, brings home the insanity of it. Towards the end of the book, he's talking about how you're in New York City, and even though you have not one but two sober companions, you call room service at the hotel, your voice shaking, detoxing, and say, please put a bottle of vodka in the bathtub of my room. Yes, the bathtub. Hide it in there. And then, when the day is done, you head back to that hotel room and you drink the bottle of vodka, and you finally feel alright again for maybe 3 hours, and then have to do it all over again the next day. This is perhaps something that a normie, what we addicts call all you lucky non-alcoholics, might struggle to understand. I'll take a stab at explaining it. This is, I think, good for anyone who is like, why does my loved one keep doing this? This is why. When you drink an entire bottle of vodka, you are extremely sick the following day. Having a few drinks in the morning helps, but I was the lead in a giant studio movie, so I could not drink in the morning. You are sick and trembling, and it feels like every part of your insides is trying to squeeze out of your body. The only way to fix how sick you are is to drink the exact same amount, or a little more, the following night. So just don't drink, says the normie. Normie. We alcoholics feel like we will literally go insane if we don't drink. Not to mention, the alcoholic will be even sicker and look sicker if he doesn't drink the bottle. I related to that so much. This is the longest video I've ever filmed. I don't know how long it will end up being, but if you are still watching, hello! I hope you have been enjoying it. Please leave maybe, I don't know, something particular. Maybe like a book emoji in the comments so that I can know you were here. That can be like our special secret signal to say hello. I appreciate you watching. I hope this gave you whatever you were looking for in terms of entertainment, or maybe to understand addiction a bit better, to hear about a good book, help you feel less alone if you're struggling. I hope this video did help in some way. It is a really good book. I highly recommend you read it. I mean, I have read quite a few passages out. I'm hoping what I've said has made you want to read it more. If you enjoyed this video, I did another Addict Reacts video reacting to John Mulaney's new special, Baby J, so I will leave that video on the screen if you want to check that out. That is a bite-sized version in comparison to this video. John Mulaney also in recovery from addiction. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more from me. I've got a whole playlist of videos where I talk about sobriety and recovery, so I'll also leave that for you if you want to check that out. Read the book, it's really good, it's entertaining, it's thought-provoking, it's funny, it's great. Please read it. I will leave a link if you want to check it out. God bless, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.